Because, you know, you have that part of the neighborhood that wants to say, no, and this is the way it should be because this is the way it's always been. And then they get all hot and bothered about it and mad, and people want to cause issues. Where the other part of it is just, let's hear about what it is. Like,
there's something liberating about just telling a story.
Yeah. Because I love to hear, like, when the Kathy Kirby and Kathy Marchant or Adam Jones, that time period when they came into this neighborhood, that was a cool time period. And to hear them tell their side of the story.
So what time period would that have been?
That would have been like in the probably late 60s, early 70s, because you're talking about Adam Jones was in college. And so he, at the Art Institute, and him coming, if you've ever heard him tell that story, it's a pretty cool story about him coming and buying that house and why he wanted to come in this neighborhood, because he wanted to go where the culture was. And this was like a really cool neighborhood. And he saw a lot of Hispanic people and was familiar with that. I can't remember where exactly he's from and all that, but they bought that house, and a bunch of them lived in that house. You know, so it was like a community house there on the west side where he's still living. And then, like Kathy Marchant and Kathy Kirby tells the story of our art center, which the people that lived in the center, in the house part, it was called the St. Francis House, and they were a group of college students, and it was a true community house in the late 60s. And they opened up their double garage out back, the little brick building back there that's now our ceramic studio, for kids to be able to have a creative environment to make art. And so they lived in the house and were raising kids and making babies, everything going on in the house. And they opened up the back, you know. So you have all this cool history. So our art center now is the house that these families were in. And our ceramic studio is where the original craft learning center was. And I remember going to the back alleyway and coming into this cool craft place that you could make all kinds of stuff. And it was these young people that had this vision of let's start off with our young people to be creative and give them an outlet, because the high school dropout rate for not only Latino students but just students in general in the neighborhood was skyrocketing.
Kids need something to do.
Yeah, and they thought, well, let's think of the littler ones so then we could start them off doing positive things. So by the time they reach middle and high school, they won't make those bad choices. How smart is that? People are still doing that today. That's exactly the way to... But, you know, you're talking about a group of people that lived, and that's how Kathy Kirby came to be, because she was friends with them. So one of her friends that were living in this house said, you need to come in this neighborhood. And so that's how she came in the neighborhood, and she's been here ever since. So you're talking 40 years, you know, around that time period of 40. It's a long time to be in a neighborhood.
40. So
it's pretty interesting to see all the changes that have occurred just on this north end of the west side. And I grew up more on the south end of the west side, and there was never, the only separation that was ever happening for kids my age growing up, you know, was the churches. So you had Sacred Heart and Guadalupe, and the bridge, the railroad, you know, the bridge, the train tracks that are across there. It was like it was the same neighborhood. We were all the west side, but it was just two levels. You know, one was like up and one was down. And I lived on the Sacred Heart side but the school was on both sides. We had the lower school on the Sacred Heart side and the upper school, which was more middle school, on right here off of Cesar Chavez Avenue. And so this north end part really didn't have a lot going on. I mean, there was houses and stuff, and there was a little market that's now Los Alamos. It was called Jingles Market, and like a Asian family that ran it. And I remember picking up kids to go to different programs that my mom would sign us up for. We would come up on a bus. We'd pick a few kids up here in this neighborhood. So I saw it, but I don't really remember as a child what it looked like. I was saying about my memory. So when I came to work here 15 years ago, even our building looked different than what it looks like today, you know, and we've had, you know, a new entranceway built in, and we've had some fun stuff. And then, of course, this whole space here was boarded up. So for 20 years, this space here was boarded up, and I don't remember it ever not being boarded up. So when I started working here, and it's like this building was just boarded, and we had our space, and that was cool. And then 13 years ago, Adam Jones and other developers bought this building, and then we all thought, wow, that was dumb. We should have bought this building, because it was sitting here for how long? And until somebody says, "Oh, I think we need to buy this building,"
right?
Then and it could have been part of Matty Rhodes, but as far as like the rest of the of the neighborhood, the school, was already here when I came on to Matty Rhodes to start working, but the school had only been there a few years. But to me, it's like it was so established already because I think it was at the time. Language magnet school, which means kids were getting bused into. The population of kids going to that school was huge, and it was Spanish, so they were full immersion classrooms and everything, and so it was pretty exciting time in the neighborhood as far as the school, positive things were going on. I don't think there was really, the Bluebird was a little market. It wasn't a restaurant bistro that it is today. Mm-hmm. It was a little market, and I remember going in there and getting like organic stuff, like some really great, I think it was chocolate chip oatmeal cookies, but it might have even been like carob chips and not chocolate. But, it was like, I remember going in and getting a coffee and being able to and so it was more store oriented, and it brought in people though, because mm-hmm. people were wanting that kind of stuff at that time period. But even neighborhood people would go up in there because they would be curious, like, oh, what they got? Oh, they got coffee. Okay, my mom buys coffee there now, or we can go get a chocolate chip cookie, or like I think they even had pickles and something else. And but as far as all the other little shops, the little restaurants, that wasn't happening at all. And then this block, Madison, was probably the first blocks that you saw changes. Gentrification started happening. The houses were being sold, and people were buying them up like crazy, and because I'm connected to the neighborhood, I saw, like I was saying before, the positive and negatives of that. Mm-hmm. People were coming in that were more I don't know any other word to use, but more suburban, like, mm-hmm. and what happens in any cool little downtown area, it's cool to be in those areas, so people start buying up their properties. So you saw that really happening, even though you've heard about it in other places. It was kind of like, oh, it happened slow, but then it really took off. So when I first was here, it wasn't a lot of it going on, but it started to happen, and then it just took off on that block. It's like all the people that had lived there moved out. Mm-hmm. And then within the next 2 or 3 blocks and even down, you started seeing that more and more. And then all these houses going down this street that are new, and the other little small block there, it was like Westside Housing started buying empty lot property and building homes in order to hopefully have people that grew up in the neighborhood come back to the neighborhood. So their direction was different than what was happening, but at the same time it was trying to help the situation. And I think some of that might have happened where people actually stayed or came back, but what you saw a lot were these really strong families that had been here for a long time that were leaving and were getting, I would hope, decent money for their properties, but right. I'm sure it probably wasn't anything to what they are worth now. I'm sure. And I don't know, it was exciting to see the houses come up, and then when those really modern contemporary ones at that cul-de-sac area on the very bottom, yeah, when those started popping up, that was something totally different. That was a little park that had it does still have the walkway that goes across the highway onto the little park where the FBI building is, but that was just a little park, and you could go in and kind of swoop around, if you were up in this neighborhood, and you're like, oh yeah. And then it was just weird that all of a sudden houses were being built around this little park area. Mm-hmm. And like, how was that okay? Like, it was like a memorial that sat in the center there which is now a cul-de-sac, but at the time I think we just saw it as more of a monument, a little like area, kids would go and hang out up there, and but because it was off the beaten path and a very dark area, kind of, so it ends up being like a hangout little spot, right. And so to see all these houses, and well, yeah, they were getting that wonderful view of Kansas and the river, on that side, and I don't know, it just didn't seem to really fit, and it's really interesting because a lot of those people, I have no idea who they are. I know a lot of the other people that live in the houses on going up and down these streets here, but I don't know those people. And And, you know, we're an agency that's a non-for-profit, so you would hope that sometimes those people would reach out to places like us that are working with kids. And so there is no grocery store. And I think that would be great. The closest one, I think a lot of the neighborhood people that, and even just me because I hang out here so much, is like the La Perry Thriftway over on 7th Street in the Armadale district, which is the other side of, you know, Kemper Arena, so it's not like it's really close. And then Sunfresh Market on, you know, on the traffic way. And then you have Constantino's, which none of the people that live in this neighborhood are going to go down there to go grocery shopping. I mean, as far as neighborhood people that have been here for a long time, you know, or that live in the housing area or that are, you know, lower income, you know, it's kind of a place maybe to go to lunch, but probably not to do their major grocery shopping. And I don't even know.
Just too expensive.
Yeah, too expensive. You know, kind of a higher end, you know, it's a great grocery store. I mean, as far as when you go in there for lunch and stuff, but as far as like a true grocery store that you can go get your meat and go get your bread and get your milk, you know, especially when you have families and kids, that's affordable. And yeah, I mean, even Sunfresh, you know, they have great food, but sometimes I think their prices are too high. And that's just for me. I'm my, you know, and I have a family too, but you know, just any other grocery stores, no. Pharmacies, you know, you have to go on Main or Broadway to CVS or Walgreens, and those have just popped up within the past 5 years or few years, you know. So, and as far as the other needs in the neighborhood, I mean, it's a fun neighborhood, and there are organizations that are helping people in the neighborhood, like as far as social needs, you know. I think there's no problem with that. I mean, you have two main social service agencies that are in this neighborhood, Guadalupe Center, Mattie Rhodes, that reach out to the community. And then you have the Tony Garrett Community Center that's, you know, on the other end of it. But I don't know. As far as other needs, I mean, I'm sure there's other needs that could be met. I mean, you know, I don't know, on a general, that I think it's nice to be able to have new development come in and make an approach to the community, like reaching out. Like I know when they built those condos that are up here, this is kind of funny, but when they built those condos on Summit, they invited us and gave us $500. And I thought to myself, $500? It's nothing.
Right.
What about a couple thousand would have been excellent. Like it would have been like a true gesture, like $500 or okay, $500 now, but what about now we're at, I don't know how long they've been there now, 5 years maybe? I don't know if it's been that long. Like, you know, have they made any attempt to reach out again to say, hey, you know what? We have X amount of spaces open and we're going to do an open house and we want to invite some of our community members to come up for a tour, for refreshments, and we want to give you a donation. I mean, it's just when people make those gestures, and I'm not here asking or looking out for those, but they came to us and it was a $500 donation, and I thought, wow, it would have been cool if they had given us a little bit more, but $500 is $500, and we were happy with $500. But so, you know, just being able to go, wow, there's these places that are in the community that need support, and how can we coming in and going to change the neighborhood? How can we make a gesture to them? What is it? Is it that, or is it is it a monetary, or is it something like we want you guys, your kids to, I'm just making this up, to come and help us to put a creative spill on it. You know, we want you guys to do a mural on this one wall that's going to be a part of, I'm making this totally up, the grocery store that we're going to be building here, or we want you to do tiles that are going to come, I don't know, you know. And Mattie Rhodes, can you help to get the neighborhood children together to create this, whatever it is? And I know we've worked with you, like with El Dorado, on like community projects, and I think that was cool because even though El Dorado group is an architect group and they've been involved in this neighborhood, it's like for them to come to us and say, hey, we want to work with you guys. We're doing this, bus station, and we want you guys to come together. And we had one of their guys come and work with the kids and work with one of our teachers, and the kids got to go down, and every day when they drive by that bus station, they can look and still X amount of years later go, oh, I did that. Look, come, Mom, let's get out of the car. I remember when I went to school at Garcia and we went to Manny Roads, we did that bus station, and look, there's the airplane that I drew, and look, there's my name on that little placard that's on the side. And so things like that, like people being able to somehow connect. It doesn't have to be monetary. but just some kind of gesture, because I would hate for something to be built with nobody, or something to be developed and nobody asked anybody about how they can, or not even asked, more made that attempt to try to reach to the neighborhood or the community. And culture, meaning the culture in general with the neighborhood, not necessarily Hispanic or Latino culture, but just the culture of it all. That this is a really neat neighborhood and has had so much happen, in the 15 years I've been here, but even way beyond that, Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I'm just talking from me, and I know that in the things that I've participated in and I've heard, or the meetings that I've gone to, it's like there's certain people that want to really be involved in the decision making of what happens in the neighborhood. Then there's other people that could really care less, but then later on they'll say, well, nobody ever asked me. And that's probably in every neighborhood, but I mean, just speaking from more what I have seen and heard. And then I even got somebody more recently that had said to me, would you even live in the neighborhood? And I thought to myself, that doesn't even matter, because I grew up here and I work and live here. Like live here meaning I'm here all the time. And so when people start asking, really pinpointing things like, well, you really have no say because you're not in the neighborhood, that would really make me upset. But, so I think there are those people that really want to be a part of the say-so, or at least feel like they've been asked. And sometimes it's just as little as that. It doesn't have to be like they're going to be right there when the ground is broke, and they're going to be right there. Some of them may, though. So
that's very true. And I guess kind of you mentioned that park that is now being developed around those kind of.
Oh, up here in the.
Are there any other places kind of in here that you kind of, or in this community, that you consider, I don't want to say like sacred, but sort of inherent to this community that you feel is
this important? Is probably one of them, right? Manny Roads.
And I guess off of that because of sort of this outreach that you provide people and the service that you provide, I mean, is there what other places that are like that here?
Well, I mean, I think the West High Switzer schools are even though they've deteriorated and are in the condition that they're in, they're still such an important part of the history of the neighborhood, because so many people went to West High School. So many kids went to Switzer, whether it was the old building or the new building. And it's like to see it either be torn away and done away with completely would probably affect a lot of people. And actually I was at Adam Jones was there. It was a historical conservation thing that had happened, and they did a meeting here. And it was really interesting, because one of the things they asked us as at different tables was, what do you connect with as far as in your neighborhood or community? And is it buildings? Is it stories? Is it people? Is it whatever? And one of the people at another table said, we connect to stories and this and that. Buildings aren't as important. And then I was like, everything that I had written was like the school that I went to, the house that I lived in, my grandmother's house that we visited, the church that I went to. So everything was connected to buildings, and it was like that was important. That's really important. Even growing up on Madison, and I think it's not.
Hey, Sid.
Sorry.
Oh no, you're fine. Come on in.
There's that where DST is now, and it was we called it the Skelly Hill because it was Skelly Properties, the oil company Skelly, that owned that property. So. It's totally about, to me, those buildings that are in those neighborhoods.
I don't know, have any been knocked down or any? I mean, I guess
like the school, the Our Lady of the Americas school, lower school, which is right by Sacred Heart Church behind. That one. And it was so funny because so many people felt the same way. My sister had gone to a fundraiser at Boulevard, and when she looked over and she was like, "Oh my God, they tore the school down!" So she's texting me, and she's taking a picture and she's put it on Facebook, and then other people are going, "I didn't know they tore it down." And one day that I drove by, and I saw it tore down, it was like my heart just sunk. It was like, oh, even though I knew it was going to be demolished because they had said it was going to be demolished.
But when that day comes,
I just didn't know.
Yeah.
And when you feel all the flood of memories that comes to your head, like, oh my gosh, the building is now gone. It's like the memories aren't gone. But it's that building that takes you to that place when you drive by, and you're able to connect and reconnect,
There was so on the site we're working on, there was a building that was recently knocked down, right?
There was an apartment.
Oh, yeah, that's right. And a lot of people lived in that space that through the years growing up and stuff. But it was so like, kind of, run down the whole, for my memory, it has always been kind of like that, and up until maybe right before that, it seemed like they started, before it got torn down, they started to do a little bit of improvement on one section of it, But I know there was a lot of people that lived in those apartments, that growing up and, so.
Do you know what the plan is for that? When you lived in the area?
Well, I have worked here at Manny Roads for 15 years, but I grew up, born and raised in the neighborhood on 26th and Madison, up until I was about, 16 or something, and moved away. But my grandmother and actually my aunt still both live. Well, I have more than one aunt that lives in the neighborhood, but
so you've got strong
family ties that are still here in this neighborhood, and even generational, ties for even on both my father and my mother's side. We have connections that have been here for a long time, and they've raised their families, and so I feel very much connected to it, even though I don't live here. My husband has a business that's here, and I work here, so we're pretty much here all the time. Yeah, and just because of the work that I do too, I'm very much. It's work that's dealing with the community on a regular basis, so it keeps me very much connected to what's happening in the neighborhoods and what's going on, and staying, as much as I can involved with what's happening. So and I love being able to talk about what I know of the neighborhood from just an open general. I'm not sitting here making judgment on, oh man, they're building these houses over here and it's horrible. I'm more on that medium ground, and that's what I was sharing with them, that I feel very fortunate to know the neighborhood well enough and see so many of the positives and negatives that happen when.
Well, you've seen a lot.
Yeah, and even like we were saying, the 15 years that I've been here, it's amazing what has occurred, and even within the school that's here. That when I first got here, it was such an amazing school. And it was a magnet school, and people were being bused to get here. Then they did away with the magnet theme, and it was no longer a language school, it was a neighborhood school. We thought, oh, that'll benefit us because we're a neighborhood community center, so we want neighborhood kids. And then now their enrollment has gone from 500 and some kids to 300 kids. And so you've seen this drastic, and that doesn't have anything to do with... And that's Primitivo. Yeah, that doesn't have really anything to do with where are the kids going or why are the kids not going. It doesn't have anything to do with the school like it's gone bad. It's more or less what's happened with the school district. So it's like all these things have affected through the years, and it's huge because when you're talking about a place like us that is right across the street from an elementary school, we have to now think differently this year and go, okay, what other schools can we get kids to come from? So we have to think differently because we know that it's not just about the school, and that's pretty much what we've done, is we focused in on the school and the kids that go to the school.
But do you think it's a matter of the school system, or do you think it's the demographics? Have the demographics changed enough?
Both. The demographics has changed on this north end, but the kids are still here on this side, and would go here. But the school district has done this to the boundaries. They've changed the boundaries. Right. So when you change the boundaries, and they've changed them like twice in 3 years. And it really affected. So some kids that were living more on the other side of downtown, their address at one time was good to still come here. And then they couldn't. So it's pretty interesting what has occurred with that. But as far as demographics, it's changed in the neighborhood. Right. But at the same time, there's still plenty of children that are in this neighborhood that can attend the neighborhood school, but I think a lot of them have pulled out because of the issues of just the school district as a whole. But,
so
changes.
Before you go, the $1 million question that we've got to ask you is:
Yes.
There's a lot of opportunity for this site. What could you imagine being there that would benefit the types of things that you're involved with in the West Side?
I think it would be really awesome to see. I don't know. I mean, it would be neat to see some of an opportunity for kind of what happened. Like what we've done here is like we have our gallery space that had been boarded up for X amount of years, and all of a sudden it gets bought and it's artsy, but at the same time we are very connected to the neighborhood and the culture, being Latino culture, but even having other opportunities for businesses to open in a place like that, whether it's like a Los Tules that would go away, would it be able to come back in that area? I mean, I would love to be. I don't have a necessarily connection to Los Tules, but at the same time, I think either a place like them or somebody like them to be able to open up and have that opportunity to have like a wonderfully new space to operate out of, whether it's a restaurant or whether it's a.
So you're talking about a mixed use that caters to smaller businesses, maybe even startup businesses.
Yeah, like startup. Being able to have that opportunity, instead of it being this outrageous like power and light district that everything's
a chain store,
right, and that you can't afford to open up a business on, and then if you do, how long will it actually last there? And something like that. I mean, even to it would be really cool to have like an area to hold maybe even a community activity, and like that's what's wrong I think with the neighborhood sometimes is here is like the community center, you can only fit so many people in there because it just is too small, and then the library, then the library, the same thing. It's like I think they
as many services as there's not that one natural convening place.
Right. I mean, the Guadalupe Center has a wonderful, amazing space. It has a wonderful it's a wonderful building, but they have to charge for you to be able to use their space, unless it's something we're doing collaboratively. Then of course you would assume it's going to be part of that deal. But something that and I understand that that's business. You have to do that, but being able to have a space where maybe it is open to more things, or maybe it's like, hey, you know what? I'm making this up. Matty Rhodes has an event going on, and we love for it to stream over into our stuff that's happening in this new space, and we want to invite them to showcase something, or whatever, kids artwork or some type of entertainment that, being able to have kind of like a area that, and even being able to have like what I was talking about earlier, like having the kids being able to, or students or artists being able to feel connected to that area, like artists that either we work with or artists that are within the neighborhood that they can, be able to help with. It's a tile wall that gets built, or it's some kind of a mural, or it's some type of I don't know, something. It would be kind of neat to see. I like what happened like with West Penway and like the little pyramid, and we helped with that, and then like with the bus station, and we helped with that. And not that it has to just be us, but we are a good venue to reach specific families. You almost have to say, Matty Rhodes is a part of it, and the families go, oh, okay, then I want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
It happens in a lot of different.
You've got the street cred.
Yeah, and they want to be able to say, okay, then I trust them. Right. I trust it because Matty Rhodes is a part of it, so I'm going to go to that event. And those are those families that have never been to a performing arts center and probably will not go. Or they will go only because it's a free event on a particular day and they know somebody that's going to be performing there, a folklore group or something that'll be there. But beyond that, they probably will never come again. So being able to make them feel comfortable about what goes on in a new space, like if it is a restaurant or a little business that stems from something out of the neighborhood or something that they're familiar with, then they're going to be more apt to feel comfortable going into that area and the new development that occurs. So, I don't know if that all made sense.
Thanks, Jenny. And actually, I've learned just in the Jarbo Park studio, it's amazing how much I learned about different ethnic groups and communities that have occupied the West Side from the beginning, and actually it was
the
very
Swedish,
yeah,
the Irish.
That was Italians were here.
Not so many Italians.
I heard that there were some Italians here.
Well, I'm sure there were, but it was mostly Swedish and Irish.
And at that time, when the neighborhood was being settled, were they kind of a bit on the fringe of sort of minorities, urban minorities?
Yeah, I mean this was their hood, and it's a fallacy that this neighborhood was originally Hispanic. Early on, it was Hispanic. There were two waves of. Do you know this already? I mean, am I giving you information?
No.
The Swedish and the Irish settled in Kansas City mainly as street workers. The Irish were responsible for cutting through the cliffs of Kansas City to make the roadways. And a lot of the fill, you see these classic pictures of Kansas City where they're, giant ravines with a house sitting on top of the ravine. A lot of that fill was thrown over, where I own some lots over on 15th and Bellevue, where it drops off to I-670. That's all fill from the 1860s and 1870s. And then it started a development, residential development. These people needed a lot of places to live. It was an enclave. They developed two churches. The churches on Chavez Boulevard were originally Swedish, and they had their congregation was in Swedish in the morning and English in the afternoon.
So what year?
This was around. It was post Civil War through the first wave of Hispanic immigrations, which paralleled the beginning of the rail system in Kansas City, which was around in the 1880s. So that was the first wave of immigrants. And a lot of the Spanish immigrants are actually living in boxcars, where Beardsley is right now. And then there was a cultural shift. They started building their houses, their little tract, one-bay houses. And then the Irish, and this happened in a lot of communities, from Boston west. The Irish were there as workers. They either went back home or they were transferred out for whatever reason, or they left on their own accord. But then there was another, after the 1880s immigration of Hispanics with the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad, there was a second wave of immigrants, Spanish immigrants or Hispanic immigrants that came around 1910. I may have my dates a little bit late, but I think it was around 1910. And that really solidified the neighborhood as Hispanic. So a lot of people look at this area and just say, well, this originally was Hispanic. Well, early on it was, but not initially. I mean, there may have been some Hispanic immigrants, but, essentially it was Anglican, if nothing else. Mm-hmm. And now you've got, it's interesting because, and I may be wrong on this, but from an architectural standpoint, you've got late 19th century homes from 1870 through the turn of the century into the 20th century. But you don't have any homes. I mean, there are decades that are just completely missed as far as any kind of development. And then as far as residential goes, and then you go into the 21st century, like with the cul-de-sac, some of the homes that are still going up. So if you look at residential development, you can almost just eliminate 3 or 4 decades of residential building.
Why do you think that is?
I think there are a lot of reasons. I think it was very difficult because, after the highway went in, when the park system, as you probably know, stretched from 6th Street all the way essentially to Jargle Park. And then it
just right along the bluffs.
Yeah, right along the bluffs. If you look at old atlases, it's just this green swath. And that was all George Kessler's design that originated as part of the 1893 Park and Boulevard system. And then you get the interstate system that eviscerated the neighborhood. So the neighborhood was cut off from the rest of, the central business district, from Midtown, and essentially from Crossroads. And I may have my Spanish, my emphasis on the wrong. It's either Colonia or Colonia. Do any of you know? Mm-hmm. Well, that was a cultural group that developed Southwest Boulevard, and it was all commercial. If you see photographs from the 1920s, I'm digressing a little bit, from the 1920s, it was all Hispanic. And I think there was, the prejudice against the area, the coming of the interstate that further isolated this area. And now, in the 21st century, we've got groups that are no longer, they're being eviscerated by the gentrification of the neighborhood. So it's more vocal now than it probably used to be. I think it was an isolated, insular community where people felt very at home. It was mostly Hispanic, after that second wave of immigration came in. And then so many things started happening during the 50s that really changed the face of the neighborhood. I still think,
interstate being the largest.
I think the interstate and the complete cutting off of that beautiful park system that stretched for, I don't know if it's, a mile. I don't know exactly, the distance. But again, from 6th Street to 17th Street.
That's truly tragic if you really start to think about it. We went on a walk and kind of overlooked the canyon that was created by the interstate. Mm-hmm. And you can't even really imagine it anymore. You can't really visualize it.
You can't. The other thing that I feel is as tragic is the complete erasing of our interurban system and mass transit system. I mean, Kansas City was the third largest cable car system in the United States, and we had a very early electric traction system. Everything was connected. You could go from the central business district to out where I lived on Troost. I mean, I used to take the streetcar before buses
Where did you
pushed out. I lived at 58 and Troost.
So is that kind of the Rockhurst general area?
It's pretty run down now. I mean, it really hasn't changed. It's just, they really aren't taking care of the properties there. Socioeconomics have changed somewhat. But I remember, my mother would just scoot us out of the house, give my brother and me a quarter each or whatever it was, and just say, "Get out of town." And we'd take the streetcar downtown, and we'd stay there for 4 or 5 hours, and then take the streetcar back, and it was so much fun. And I think there was a lot of that here too, because you could actually walk to the central business district, take the 8th Street tunnel or the 8th Street incline into Kansas City, Kansas. Now, I don't know how much of that activity went on with this particular neighborhood, but if you're talking about Crossroads...
For the sake of those who don't know, describe the incline, that system of transportation.
The 8th Street incline was, it was one of the wonders of the world to me, and I had the great fortune to actually go into part of it the only part of it that still exists. And the incline, it was part of the mass transit system. It was developed in the 1880s, the electric traction part, the late 1880s when cable went out. And an engineer who should be honored much more than he is, named Robert Gillum, developed the 8th Street tunnel, and it started at Broadway and on 8th Street, and then there was an incline, and then you went into a tunnel. The tunnel's still there. You have to talk to DST to get in it, but it might be worth looking. It's so phenomenal. It's in a parking lot. The entry to the tunnel's in a parking lot now. You have to open 2 doors, and then you get this unbelievable air quality just comes wafting through. It's just amazing, and it's in perfect condition. So anyway, you're traveling down 8th Street West. You go through this tunnel, and I can't remember what the incline is, but you finally reached the 8th Street incline after you exited the tunnel outside, onto the bluffs, and it was like a roller coaster ride, and it was an 18% grade. I mean, that's steep. And that connected you with not only where the railroad depot used to be, but then it continued on. It was an elevated, just like you have in Chicago, all the way to Kansas City, Kansas. And that's all gone. I mean, it's amazing. So the reason I bring that up is because obviously it was such a connector for the entire community, not just, on this side of the state line, but in Kansas City, Kansas as well. And then tie that in with an interurban, which was all over the United States. We happen to have a really great interurban that connected Kansas City, Missouri with Excelsior Springs and St. Joe. It was this triangle. And it was like a pleasure cruise, but people actually, they had business in Excelsior Springs, and they had get in these fabulous cars with mohair seats, take your ride out to Excelsior Springs and enjoy the baths, at Excelsior Springs, and then go on to St. Joe and come back to Kansas City. That's all gone. So, our means of transportation have changed. Everything's cut off. We're no longer sitting on front porches anymore. We're making enemies, based on, I think, a lot of false information. It's today, as I see it, and I do feel like an outsider, even though I was born and bred in Kansas City, and I'm very familiar, with a lot of parts of the city and how they've changed.
Well, you're a West Sider too.
Well, yeah, I guess I am.
Yeah, I would say you are truly a West Sider.
Yeah. And I've been to meetings, and I don't feel like, except for, my living in Kansas City, for as long as I've been alive, 61 years. And as an architectural historian, I can comment on what's happened, but, as a white woman, I don't feel like I can interchange with a lot of, or comment on a lot of what's going on right now. I think the woman that, I'm sorry, Jenny, she has, we all have a stake in the neighborhood as Kansas Cityans, but she's much more familiar to talk about the cultural, she's embedded culturally where I'm not. As almost like a voyeur, and certainly an historian, I can comment, but, I turn to people like Jenny that, have lived here for generations that really know, what this community needs. I can give you my ideas on how I perceive activities in the neighborhood, what I'm drawn to besides, the parks, the park system, and, the cliffs, looking to the east bottoms and the west bottoms, certainly the architecture, but beyond that, I don't, I almost feel like an outsider, saying to Jenny, well, I think you need.
Yeah.
It's like, how dare you say that? But
well, we're getting ready to
ask me.
Well, we're getting ready as a studio to potentially.
Well, I think the beauty of the site is, in my mind, no one's really staking a claim on it. All the activity is this way and that way, and then south of Southwest Boulevard. But, as someone that takes that route, on Broadway quite a bit, I don't even think people can really tell you what's there except for Denny's because of the yellow and orange sign. Or maybe if you go to the restaurant.
A lot of people like Los Tules, the Mexican restaurant.
No, I'm not dismissing that, but I see that area, and again, this is probably a selfish position that I'm taking, but there's so much diversity here, not just from a human standpoint, but from it's a migratory path for butterflies, for birds. I think that in itself, it could almost be a science center to, for people to come in. You've got, let me point out one thing, directly across from that site, you've got the garden, which I think is beautiful. I think they did a really good job on that. I really want to see how that grows over time. So kind of blending into that theme of nature and taking advantage of learning. Probably aware of this. A lot of the 1920s, 1930s low-rise buildings to the south, the Performing Arts Center, that was initially used as a film distribution center for Kansas City, and we were really well known for that. The Vitagraph building was just renovated by Shirley Hellsberg. And so on the other side, the west side of Broadway, you have Screenland, and you do have community spaces in there. I mean, maybe it's part, kind of a film center for kids. I mean, cameras are cheap. I think we're just inundated with art galleries and a lot of bad art. I mean, I've had it up to here. But my degrees are in art history, so, I guess I'm allowed to bitch and moan about that. But I just think, continue on with the sciences. We don't have enough of that. And I think, there's that visual connection, flight, Performing Arts Center, music. You've got the ballet center that just opened. And I don't know what's going to happen with the old ballet building. About scale, I mean, I think kind of the sky's the limit. I wouldn't want it too high, but I'm not necessarily opposed to multi-story. Live, center for something, for the sciences, for the monarch butterflies. I don't know, but I know that there's so many people even today that just say, if you see anything that comes available on the west side, let me know. So affordable, make the housing affordable if that's how you're seeing it. I just like for a lot of people starting out to be able to experience this renaissance in Kansas City that's happening right now. There's so much going on, between the ballet opening and the Performing Arts Center. And Power and Light, hate it or love it, it's there, and it's provided a lot for Kansas City. I mean, it's busy, and the Sprint Center as well. So I could see a portion of it being, residential.